Hey everybody, I wanted to do a screencast walkthrough of how I want to collect the data for our weekly site reports. I think that we can make this as simple as possible, but still track things that can help our students quite a bit and help us stay on track with how we can help them to the maximum. So I want to share my screen, and I've tried to put template examples at the bottom of each of the tabs where we're collecting like categories such as students that can't sit class now, and we're tracking, who is now able to sit class, etc. So I want to show the spreadsheet, and I also want to show the report that I think would be very easiest at the end of the week to create. So I know, Noni, I've tasked you with doing this. I want to show you, with a bit more guidance now, how I think the simplest way to convey this information will be moving forward using the Google Sheet. So let me share my screen. And so let's look at the sheet real quick, and I'm going to show all the tabs. So on our sheet here, the new enrolled student status. In my simple opinion, I think if we have the date, the site, the student name, and then sit class, yes, no, that's it. The notes column's fine as well. I think these other categories like the mandatory document status and transcript status, we do that on the enrollment status already. So to me, it's not very important. This is key, though, when we get somebody to transition from the ability not to be able to sit class to sit class, that we change the date. So I think instead of enrollment date, what we're looking at is to know that this date category is when action happens. So if a student comes in and they are able to bring in whatever is needed to sit class, we need to change this, because what we want to do is look at this on a weekly basis. So similar to the enrollment status on these various categories, if we can change this date when someone in this specific situation moves from a status where they can't sit class to can sit class. So again, the categories I think that are needed on this particular sheet, the date, the site name, the student name, and then this F column category, or the F column information of sit class, yes, no. Here's what I want at the end of each week that I think will make life easy. Pardon my example, none of the numbers in here are the real numbers. So I didn't calculate, but I just wanted to show how simple this is. So down below all the information that's been gathered, we can put the week of, whatever the week is, the site names here, and we can include Hamilton and Reading Road. That's fine as well, or Hamilton. But all we want to track in this next column is cannot sit class students. All that would need to be gathered in this situation is how many students from each site still can't sit class, okay? I just threw out an arbitrary number. I think 75 is probably pretty close to what it is at Melrose, but don't think like, oh, that number's wrong. I'm just throwing this out as an example. So we want the total number of students that can't sit class, and we want the ones that week that now can sit class. So all we're tracking is can't sit class, can sit class. Obviously, our ultimate goal is to get every student to a can sit class status. The way I got this graph is very simple. I just highlighted the information, and Noni, this is just a simple thing that we can do. Instead of tracking individual names and all that good stuff, let's do it like this. So highlight the information that you've gathered after the week is up, put in all the proper numbers. Once that's highlighted, go up to our insert chart, and it should, and I think, because I'm going to actually take this out really quick. delete the chart. But once I do this and it's highlighted and I go to the insert chart, there we go. It inserts the chart based on the numbers here. And let me slide this up. I know I'm covering some of the numbers doing this. These bar graphs here, in and of themselves, if we copy paste, it would be hard to know exactly what numbers these are. So double click the bar and it will allow us to have control over like the color and what information's on that specific line or that specific portion of the bar. You can change the color here. If it's a cannot sit class, probably making it red makes sense. And then this is the helpful thing that I'd love to do. Do a data label. So check the data label box so there's a number. So for the cannot sit class people, there's 75 at Melrose. And again, numbers aren't right. 22 downtown, 18 West Side. I made that red. It's confusing if the now can sit class is also red. So let's change that to green because that's good. We want people to be able to sit class. And let's also data label that. Okay? So very simply, and I'm going to slide this out now that we're done with it so it's out of the way. This is an example. Cannot sit students. Okay, this is how many of those folks we have for that week. And then can sit students. What we're looking at, again, is how many students can sit class and can't sit class. The particulars of why they can or can't can still be tracked in the enrollment status thing. So let's not double work. Let's just get these and display the information like so. So that is for the cannot sit class status tab. Or I'm sorry, that's for the new enrolled student status tab. All we're tracking is either they can or can't sit class. For the suspended test, I think the information that we are collecting is fine. Again, when somebody would come in and complete a test that's not complete, if we could shift this date, since we're looking at things on a more weekly basis, that will allow us to track more accurately. So the date, I think, is right. Site name, of course, is right. Student name, yes. Test type, yes. I don't know if scheduled to complete is something that is really super relevant. I would just say that completed, yes, no, versus scheduled or anything. Keep this as simple as possible. If you want to have notes that somebody said that they're coming in, great. But what we're really trying to do is get down to the crux of it. Did someone come in and finish a test that was suspended where they didn't earn the credit? That's what I want to track. And down at the bottom, you can see this. I tried to keep this very simple. Again, using the week as one of the baselines, the 3 sites, and again, we can add Hamilton or night school to this. That would be great. But the total number of suspended tests there were that week and the amount of those tests that are now completed. If you look over at my graph that the graph that was generated, we've got in the red this tests that are still suspended, obviously something we want to track, but more importantly, how many of those did we get out of suspended where the student went from not having that credit to having it. So all we're trying to do there is track how many total there are and how many that week were pulled out of the suspended status and pushed into complete. And just a recap, this is really just an item for you, Noni, highlighting this information that you've compiled and then going up, and I'm not going to do it, but to our insert graph, putting that in. Again, if you want to manipulate the individual bars on the graph, you'll just double click on one. It will open up the Customize tab, and under Series, you'll see that you can change the color here, and then you just add data label so the actual number that's correlated with the bar is added in. We'll go a few more, or I'm sorry, we'll also talk about the last 2. You certainly can take out my examples when we're done so you can enter more information in. But this is how I'd like to do it, just so we're not overworking, but still tracking things that are really important to each of our sites and to our overall program. OGT eligible, again, date as things change. If we could kindly change the date category to whatever date, information changed, that'd be good. site, student name. I think the scheduled for all column is probably not very important. What I just like to track is three very simple things. I think always adding notes is fine. It adds a lot of context because we are dealing with so many people. But the three categories of information I find most pertinent, and I think we would all probably want to track this, is what tests, what OGTs are folks scheduled for, and please include the form by either using F1 or F2, Form 1 or Form 2. You can add in the scheduled date, but again, remember to shift our date over here as well. So in the scheduled, if they're scheduled either that present week or in the future, put that in the scheduled box. If they've not yet scheduled a test, put what those are in the proper form number. And then if there are results pending, meaning they've taken certain tests, but we're waiting to get the test result back, if you could kindly add that to the results pending box. If there's any specific notes, such as, that what the person still needs to do, or they called in or something to that effect, add that in. I think that that's very helpful. So when we're making calls on unscheduled, maybe we know the person visited that week and is not yet to the point where they can schedule or whatever. So the notes are very important. But the three things I want to track kind of from a data perspective: how many tests did we schedule? How many tests are yet to be scheduled? And then how many of the results are pending? And at the bottom, you'll see that the chart reflects those areas that I think are the most pertinent. Again, the way I built the data table is pretty simple. Just the week, Monday through Friday, if that's the case. The three sites, again, we can add in the night programs, tracking students that are, I did track how many students total at each site are eligible to take OGT, how many people are scheduled for test, or how many tests are scheduled, how many tests are unscheduled, and then how many people have results pending. If we can just note, if you could kindly tally those up and then highlight that information, build the graph out. Again, let's make sure that we have our data points labeled. Again, colors aren't that important, but I made unscheduled red just because that's the pivotal thing. We want to help as many students as possible get scheduled who are eligible for this. And if they have a good reason for being unscheduled, such as in process for studying or whatever, if we can add that into the notes, just so we know where every single student is at on these really pivotal tasks. Okay, last category, the one that I think we all want to help students get to, is the graduates. I think all the information on here is pertinent, and in the notes category, I know we have Not Walking by Evelyn Bailey. I think that that's a very smart thing to do. I made the table very simple. Grads for the week, total grads, meaning, if it's outside of the week, how many people are going to graduate in May from your site, and then surveys completed. It would be great for every single grad if we could get them to finish the graduate survey so we can make sure that they're feeling like they had a great high quality experience. That would be wonderful. But I hope this provides some context to what I think could help us all help the students more effectively, and what we could do every single Friday to make sure that each site's staying on track with this. So again, just as a quick recap, I don't feel that the mandatory doc status is necessary on this page, or transcript status, just the enrollment date or the date that we last interacted with the student's status. So if a student goes from can't sit class on 2/19 and they come in, let's say, March the 11th, and they can now sit class, let's change that to March the 11th. But if we can do the date, the site name, the student name, and then can sit class, yes, no, that would be huge there. And then at the bottom here, at the end of the week, once this data has been all gathered up and put in a chart, if we can just copy this information and then paste it in to a report like this, where we have students who cannot sit class versus the ones who can, and everything's labeled, suspended test versus completed test. OGT eligible students, you know, how many are eligible, how many are scheduled, how many are unscheduled, and how many results are pending at each site. That would be huge. And then, of course, grads, if we can look at the grads for that week, if we can look at the grads, you know, that we've got for May, and then how many surveys they've completed. This would be huge. It would help me out a lot. I think this is a very simple way we can use this sheet. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. I'm trying to make this easy, but I do think it's pertinent and helpful if each site can track this data and really help our students stay on top of these key categories. So let me know if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Bye.